in Durban. Serving as a brahmachari ashram leader and head pujari for a few years, in 2001, he was appointed temple president of ISKCON Durban, a service he maintained for 15 years. Married to Sukumari Dasi, he's still based at the Shri Radhanath Temple. And after serving as a co-national secretary for ISKCON in South Africa and traveling and teaching Krishna conscious philosophy throughout South Africa and in India, he was recently requested to again serve as temple president for the Shri Radhanath Temple. A priority survey of his is to develop avenues to make Krishna consciousness accessible to the diverse communities in South Africa by way of cultural festivals promoting social cohesion. And there you are. Please take it away, Prabhu. Thank you for being with us.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sarvatma Prabhu, kindly inviting me to have all of y'all's association, the devotees connected to the Gita Nagari temple, Shri Shri Radha Damodara ji. Much appreciated. So this morning, my afternoon here in South Africa, we'll be continuing the discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam as per your morning class. On this very important section, Lord Shiva's discussions with the Prachetas. And we at the end closing out chapter 24. So we'll read and discuss those last two verses, 78 and 79. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 78. Idamya kalya uttaya pranjali shradayan vita shunuyat shravayan martyo muchyate karma bandhanai. Idam, this prayer. Yaha, a devotee who kalye, early in the morning, uttaya, after getting up from bed, pranjali, with folded hands, shradaya, with faith and devotion, anvitaha, thus being absorbed, shrinuyat, personally chants and hears, shravayat, and gets others to hear, martya, such a human being, muchyate, becomes freed, karma bandhanai, from all kinds of actions resulting from fruitive activities. Translation. A devotee who rises early in the morning and with folded hands chants these prayers sung by Lord Shiva and gives facility to others to hear them, certainly becomes free from all bondage to fruitive activities. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Mukti, or liberation, means becoming free from the results of fruitive activities. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.6, Muktir hitva anyata rupam. Mukti means giving up all other activities and being situated in one's constitutional position. Swarupena vyapashtitihi. In this conditional state, we are entangled by one fruitive activity after another. Karma bandhana means the bonds of fruitive activity. As long as one's mind is absorbed in fruitive activities, he has to manufacture plans for happiness. The Bhakti Yoga process is different. For Bhakti Yoga means acting according to the order of the Supreme Authority. When we act under the direction of Supreme Authority, we do not become entangled by fruitive results. For instance, Arjuna fought because the Supreme Personality of Godhead wanted him to. Therefore, he was not responsible for the outcome of fighting. As far as devotional service is concerned, even hearing and chanting is as good as acting with our body, mind, and senses. Actually, hearing and chanting are also activities of the senses. When the senses are utilized for one's own sense gratification, they entangle one in karma. But when they are used for the satisfaction of the Lord, they establish one in bhakti. Text 79. Gitam mayedam naradeva nandana parasya pungsa paramatmana stavam chapantam ekagra diyashtapo mahat charadvamante tata apsyate psikam. Translation. My dear sons of the king, the prayers I have recited to you are meant for pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supersoul. I advise you to recite these prayers, which are as effective as great austerities. In this way, when you are mature, your life will be successful, and you will certainly achieve all your desired objectives without fail. Purport. If we persistently engage in devotional service, certainly all our desires will be fulfilled in due course of time. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 24th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Arigaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. These prayers of Lord Shiva, which I'm sure all of you have been regularly attending the last few weeks, the Srimad Bhagavatam class, would have been very moved by the auspiciousness and the beauty of these prayers. And in this verse, we find, well, in the first of the verses, the 78th verse, we find Lord Shiva is recommending a method by which to chant these prayers. Rising early in the morning with folded palms, Anjali, Pranjali. So this is the method he's recommending it, by which to chant these prayers. And this method that he is presenting can also be applied to all other prayers that we can offer to the Lord. Of course, especially in chanting the greatest of all prayers, the Maha Mantra, any time is suitable, any time is beneficial, any situation is suitable, and any situation is beneficial. Still, we are guided by Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas to chant early, to wake up early and to chant with a respectful and reverential manner. So yes, while there's no hard and fast rules in the matter of chanting the holy names of the Lord, there is a quality to the chanting that is required if one wants to very nicely attract the reciprocation of Krishna. And these factors that Lord Shiva is presenting, like chanting in the morning, chanting with a respectful attitude, a reverential attitude. These greatly help attract the Lord's attention to our chanting. Also, in this verse, there's so much in this verse, actually. This verse guides us, Lord Shiva is guiding us, that for those devotees who just don't chant it for themselves or for their own benefit, but when they share the opportunity with others, when they make arrangements for others to hear these prayers, then that type of devotee gets a very, very special blessing. The blessing to become free from all material bondage. So Lord Shiva here, we can see he's recommending the spirit of sharing Krishna consciousness with others. Not just sharing it, but making nice facilities for these people to hear these wonderful prayers. And we find that with Srila Prabhupada. He chanted the prayers, chanted the glorification of Krishna, and he shared it with others and made elaborate, wonderful facilities and arrangements for thousands and thousands of people to hear and chant the same prayers. And in this very nice purport, this impactful purport, we find Srila Prabhupada, he's exploring different perspectives on liberation, different perspectives on bondage, karma bandhanai, and also bhakti yoga, and how the engagement of the senses determines whether one is implicated in bondage, karmic bondage, or whether one is situated in a liberated condition or in devotional service. In the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada, well, he quotes, no, sorry, not the 10th canto, in the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, we find this verse that Prabhupada's quoting in this purport, spoken by Shukadeva Goswami, Muktir Hitva Anyata Rupam Swarupena Vyavastitihi. That liberation is that constant situation, that permanent situation of the living entity after the living entity gives up that ever-changing, ever-transient, gross and subtle material bodies and gives up all the things connected to that gross and subtle body, all types of designations, all types of conceptions that one develops based on attachment to the gross and subtle body that we have. So this is liberation. This is mukti. And we find in various religious circles, even spiritual circles, mukti, or liberation, essentially means the cessation, the stopping of all our suffering. But Srimad Bhagavatam doesn't, it's not satisfied with that type of understanding or that type of motivation of what liberation is. It's not interested in this temporary type of liberation. It's not interested in anything short, actually, of the ultimate aim of life. Right at the outset, Srimad Bhagavatam declares, Dharma projita kaitavatra, that it'll discard, it'll reject all these types of understandings. Therefore, Bhagavatam is clearly saying, Shukadeva Goswami is clearly saying, that liberation means to be situated properly in one's constitutional position. Jivera Swarupa hoy, Krishna Nityadas. One is an eternal servant of Krishna. And that eternal servant of Krishna means one is eternally situated in a relationship with Krishna that has the foundation of servitude. And when is that when is that constitutional position manifested? It starts to manifest, as that verse says, Mukti hitva anyata rupam. When one gives up all types of connection, all types of influence that is born from the gross and subtle bodies, and giving up all activities connected to that. This is what liberation is that Srila Prabhupada is presenting. Of course, we don't just give up the gross and subtle bodies, we don't give up activities, rather we replace those activities with positive engagement in service to Krishna. This is our form of liberation from that point, from which bhakti actually starts. Oftentimes we hear this word, the conditioned living entity, material conditioning. And for years, I've always had one understanding of what the word conditional means. Sort of, we are influenced. But there are various ways, two in particular, two things it could mean. One is that there are conditions for every action that we are engaged in, by which we can actually do something, or by which the result for any of our activities can be born. There are conditions for that. And the other, which is more common, is that our actions are influenced by the modes of material nature. So conditioned, that there are conditions for our activities, means that we are not free. We are not independent. We have parameters that box us in when we are in the material frame of reference. So we are not free. There are conditions for each and every move we make by the workings of material nature. And so because of our desires, because of our karmic activities, we get this material body. And this functioning of this body, it's governed by so many conditions, so many conditions. This is what Prabhupada refers to now, karma bandhanai, entanglement in fruitive activities. This type of entanglement, the extent or the degree of entanglement, it's based upon our activities. It's like quicksand. If any of you have been in quicksand, I've never been, I've just seen videos of it. The more we move around, the more we struggle in the quicksand, the more we engage in karmic activities, the more we get entangled, the more we sink. People advise, when you're in quicksand, stop moving. So we have to stop our engagement in karmic activities. We have to at least stop it. But that only pauses our sinking in the quicksand, or sinking in entanglement. So it's not a sustainable situation. But when we transfer our activity cannot be avoided. When we transfer our activity into the service of Krishna, and very importantly, under the direction and under the desire of Krishna, Krishna's representative, then we are able to reverse the entanglement. When we hold on to a rope or a branch given by somebody to pull us out, that's the desire of Krishna, that's the direction of Krishna. We get pulled out of the quicksand, we get pulled out of the material whirlpool, and the knots of material desires start to loosen. And that's when we start to become uninfluenced or unconditioned. Our activities, yes, it's kind of contained within the body, because the material body can only do so much, it gets so much tired, we grow old, our energy lapses. But by the direction of Krishna, by the empowerment of Krishna, at least the mind and the desire can be unlimited in its desire to serve Krishna. So there's no conditionings. There is no condition that can limit us when we are engaged in this way. Also in the purport, I like this one point Srila Prabhupada makes. As long as one's mind is absorbed in fruitive activities, he has to manufacture plans for happiness. So the conditions for our happiness in the material world, they're always changing. Always changing. There's some improvement of some commodity that we've been using or we attach to, then we have to make plans to get a new to get the upgraded version. Or when someone is very grossly conditioned, they have a spouse or a partner, and then we both grow old, and then they see a quote unquote newer model, they want to get a newer model. Keep changing, keep adjusting our plans like this. It's always adjusting. Material life really means constant change, always changing. And therefore our plans have to be constantly adjusted. And therefore there's no peace, there's no peace. But in the process of devotional service, in bhakti yoga, we are lifted, we transcend out of this constantly changing world. and we act for the pleasure of Krishna under the direction of Krishna and Krishna's representatives. So when we act like that, we find ourselves that we are guided and we are moved by Krishna's plans for happiness. For each and every living entity, Krishna has a plan for us as well. I was hearing the section from Bhagavatam the other day, where Krishna, who has unlimited qualities, and it's described that for each and every living entity, the unlimited number of living entities, there is a particular quality of Krishna that resonates especially with that living entity. Trillions and trillions, who knows how many living entities. There's a quality that Krishna has that's specifically focused on that living entity, attractive to that living entity especially. So this is really wonderful of Krishna. Of course, one may question then that we have a material body and we're existing in an ever-changing world. And even as devotees, we know our circumstances are constantly changing. We move around, we change jobs, so many things happen. It seems like we are just like those who are not devotees, those who are materialists. So what is the difference? Aren't our plans also changing as well, as what Prabhupada says in that point? But the difference for the devotees is that if we are true to the process of devotional service, then the focus of our activities are on that one constant, the ultimate constant, and that is Sri Krishna. Krishna never changes. And that's where we find our happiness. For the materialist, the conditions of happiness are always changing, and therefore newer and newer plans have to be manufactured. But with devotional service, no matter what's going on around us, no matter what's going on in the body, because everything around us, or everything within our control or influence, including our body, is focused on that unchanging Krishna in our lives. So Prabhupada also makes the point that even though a devotee's activities, which are changing externally, they're not implicated in karmic bondage. They are not. Why? Because the devotee is acting under the direction of Krishna. And Prabhupada makes this important point by referring to Arjuna. Arjuna fought, he killed, who knows how many hundreds of thousands or more soldiers in the battle of Kurukshetra. And initially Arjuna was he was quite reluctant due to confusion, thinking that Krishna is asking me to kill, but so much of sin will be covering me. Who knows what will happen to me? But after hearing transcendental knowledge from Krishna, his doubts were lifted, his confusion was dissipated, and he acted in that way. Otherwise, killing so many people, deeply, deeply sinful activity. But because it was done for Krishna, on the request of Krishna, under Krishna's direction, there was absolutely no karmic reaction. Rather, there would have been deep karmic reaction if he hadn't done it, even after Krishna had instructed him or requested him. We hear something slightly similar in regard to Yudhisthira Maharaj in the same battle, that he was very hesitant to follow Krishna's advice or request to utter that misleading statement to Dronacharya, stating that his son Ashvatthama was killed, who of course we know Ashvatthama wasn't killed. But to sort of make Dronacharya distracted and lose all composure so that they can then defeat him, this lie had to be told. Otherwise, there was no hope for victory for the Pandavas. But Yudhisthira hesitated. He hesitated, and he even adjusted it a little. And it's described that because of the potency of Yudhisthira Maharaj's dharmic principles, his chariot on which he rode never touched the ground. It was always a few inches off the ground. But after the incident of the killing of Dronacharya, it's described that Yudhishthira's chariot touched the ground, was no more hovering above the earth. And some people say it's because Yudhishthira lied and broke his dharmic principles. That's why he suffered the reaction of his chariot touching the ground. But the Vaishnava commentators go much deeper in the understanding. And they say that because Yudhishthira hesitated to follow Krishna's instruction, the instruction of the Supreme Lord, who is perfect in all respects, whose plans are complete in all respects, because he hesitated, that's why his chariot touched the ground thereafter. So when we follow, when we act under the direction of Krishna, for the pleasure of Krishna, no matter what our circumstances are, there is no karmic implication whatsoever. And then, to round off the purport, Prabhupada brings the whole concept to a much more practical platform, much more practical. Generally, our activities, our actions are based in the activities of the senses, especially the senses of hearing and speaking, hearing and chanting. And when we use the senses for our own gratification, the gratification of the material body, then the activity of the senses is binding us to the material world. But when one is engaged in the, when one engages the senses for the pleasure of Krishna, Rishikena Rishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. This verse from the Narada Pancharatra that Lord Chaitanya quotes or speaks in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that when one is engaged in utilizing one's senses for pleasing the senses of the master of the senses, then that is liberating. That is liberating. And that is bhakti yoga. This is bhakti. And before that, the verse says, Sarvapadi vinir muktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. How to be established in that situation, how to engage one's senses in the service of Krishna, who is the master of all senses. One has to have some qualification. One has to be able to do away with the designations that are connected to the material body and the mind. This is important. This is very important. We can't be engaged in bhakti, feeling like we engaged in bhakti, taking prasad, hearing and chanting, using these senses, but we are still developing more and more, building up more and more designations connected to the material body. This sometimes happens. Sometimes happens. Let me become bigger in this way. Let me become, get more accolades in this way. Let me be known for this in the material world. It's like trying to build a fire and pouring water over it. So it's very important that while we are engaged in using our senses, especially the tongue and the ears, in serving Krishna, we must also be careful not to be building up these designations. Sarva upadi, we must get rid of all upadis, all designations. Vinir muktam, we must clear it all away. Also in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Adi Lila, it's described the difference in the engagement of the senses, how it's used, and the results of it. There it said, Atmendriya priti vancha tare bali kama, Krishnendriya priti icha tare prema nama. That to gratify one's senses, that desire is called lust or kama. And the desire to please the senses of Krishna, this is love. Prema nama, this is called love. So here it's a very telling difference is given. Before coming to the class, I hadn't taken breakfast here. It is Ekadashi here, and I skipped breakfast. And I'm thinking this class with Gita Nagari cuts across our lunchtime. I'm really hungry, you know, I haven't tasted anything the whole day. And then I thought about this verse, which, you know, is one of the points of the purport, that how easy it is to get caught up in gratifying the senses. It is very subtle and very sneaky, actually. It can get like that. But we are so fortunate that even in our desire to gratify the sense of the tongue, let's say, we are so fortunate that we have prasadam, that even that desire to eat or to satisfy the urges of the belly, so to speak, even that gets purified by Krishna's mercy, Krishna's favor in the form of prasadam. So the process of bhakti yoga, over and above any other process that leads to liberation, it's so much easier, so much more efficient, and it's self-correcting our bad habits. By doing the same things that we do to attain sense gratification, we can get taste for Krishna consciousness. We don't have to change much, hardly anything. This is the wonderful, super efficient and merciful nature of bhakti yoga. So this principle of engaging the senses is so vital to our process of bhakti. Actually, it's foundation, if that's the word. It's based on that. It's based on that. And today we, you know, in the US, it's tomorrow for us in South Africa, but today in the US is the disappearance anniversary of that great saint, Sripad Madhavendra Puri. And it's described by the histories, the accounts of Madhavendra Puri, that he really showed the way of how to engage one's senses in the service of Krishna. He brings life to that verse, Atmendriya Priti Vanchatari Balikama, Krishnendriya Priti Ichadhare Prema Nama. That he was very, very cautious not to succumb to the dictates of the tongue and other senses, but rather he focused, he was very, very careful, very, very vigilant to focus the use of his senses for the pleasure of Rishikesh, the master of the senses. So yeah, with y'all's permission, I thought it would be very purifying and very inspiring today to recount some of the glories of Sripad Madhavendra Puri. So would that be okay to do now, Sarvatma Prabhu, or should we just pause to see if there's any comments from the devotees?
It's up to your discretion.
Okay, so let's move directly into the some topics of Sripad Madhavendra Puri. I'll just read one verse and short purport by Srila Prabhupada from the other Leela, which glorifies Sripad Madhavendra Puri. Jaya Shri Madhava Puri Krishna Prema Pura Bhakti Kalpatarura Tenho Pratama Ankura. Translation. All glories to Sri Madhavendra Puri, the storehouse of all devotional service unto Krishna. He is a desire tree of devotional service, and it is in him that the seed of devotional service first fructified. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sri Madhavendra Puri, also known as Sri Madhava Puri, belonged to the disciplic succession from Madhvacharya and was a greatly celebrated sannyasi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the second disciplic descendant from Sri Madhavendra Puri. The process of worship in the disciplic succession of Madhvacharya was full of ritualistic ceremonies, with hardly a sign of love of Godhead. Sri Madhavendra Puri was the first person in that disciplic succession to exhibit the symptoms of love of Godhead, and the first to write a poem beginning with the words, Ai Dina Dayardranata, O supremely merciful personality of Godhead. In that poem is the seed of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's cultivation of love of Godhead. So just by this, we can appreciate what an important, special, pioneering position Madhavendra Puri holds in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Before Madhavendra Puri in the Madhva Sampradaya, there was no evidence actually of Madhurya Ras, the conjugal relationship with Krishna. And also it was Madhavendra Puri who first unveiled, and it's shown in this very important poem that Prabhupada referred to, Ayodhya Dayardranatha. It was Madhavendra Puri who first unveiled the deep mood of separation from Krishna. That deep mood as the process by which to experience the highest bliss in service to Krishna. This is called Vipralamba, Bhav Vipralamba Seva. So yeah, so the credit for the conception of Vipralamba Bhav is given to Shripad Madhavendra Puri by Lord Chaitanya. This is the first time it manifests in our Sampradaya. And as I said earlier, the desire to please the Lord's senses was best shown by Shripad Madhavendra Puri. And he set the example. And it's described that Lord Chaitanya and his associates, they adopted the same process taught by Madhavendra Puri and made it the standard for our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So yes, a very, very special place indeed, a very, very special personality. And in Krishna's Kaivaraj Goswami's Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Madhya Lila, there's a nice section, actually an entire chapter that's devoted to describing the amazing service, the pure devotional service of Srila Madhavendra Puri. That once Lord Chaitanya, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami is describing that shortly after he took sannyas, there's a whole elaborate description how he gets sort of distracted by Nityananda Prabhu to not go to Vrindavan, but they end up in Shantipur, and then they meet Mother Shachi, and Mother Shachi presents her desires that he mustn't go too far away, but rather just go to nearby Jagannath Puri, where she can get word about his activities and things like that, so she can feel connected to her son, Lord Chaitanya. So from Advaitacharya's house in Shantipur, they're traveling to Jagannath Puri. And while in Orissa, the Lord and his associates, Lord Nityananda, Mukunda Jagadananda, who else was there? Damodar Pandit. They ended up at this place, Remuna, where the very intriguing and amazing deity of Chir Chor Gopinath is worshipped. Chir Chor means, or Gopinath, Chir Chor Gopinath means the Gopinath deity who stole Chor, Chira, sweet rice, who stole sweet rice. And it was a very special arrangement, actually, that the Lord ended up there. He had heard previously from his spiritual master, Ishvara Puri, about the glories of this deity and why this deity became so famous as Shira Chor Gopinath. He was just Gopinath before, but at a certain point in time, he got the accolade or the fame of being Chira Chor, the deity who stole the sweet rice. So when the Lord arrived there, he visited the deity, took darshan of the deity, and while offering obeisances, it's described that the flower crown, the flower helmet of the deity fell down and landed on the head of Lord Chaitanya. And that sent Lord Chaitanya, of course, into ecstasy, and he danced and danced and danced with his four associates, Lord Nityananda and the others. And then he began to recount to the devotees why Kirchor Gopinath became so famous, that he had heard from Ishvara Puri. And this is with regard to Shripad Madhavendra Puri. And the Lord's telling them the story of how Madhavendra Puri once was traveling to Vrindavan especially to come to Giriraj Govardhan. And when he came there, it's described that he went into ecstasy. He was almost mad in ecstasy. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what time of the day it was. He had no discrimination whatsoever. And after some time, he composed himself, and then Madhavendra Puri went to the lake Govindakund, took his bath, and sat down under a tree, getting ready to take his rest. And all that time, he was fasting. He was fasting. And as he was sitting there chanting, a young, beautiful cowherd boy, very attractive cowherd boy, came with a pot of milk and presented it to Madhavendra Puri and told him, please drink this milk. You should have this. And it's described, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami describes that when Madhavendra Puri saw the form of this child, this young cowherd boy, this Gowala, he lost all hunger and thirst. He forgot that he was hungry or that he was thirsty. He became very satisfied. And then he asked the boy, you know, where do you live? And how did you know that I was fasting? You know? And the boy said, my dear Madhavendra Puri, I live nearby in this village. And in my village, no one fasts. I'd like to live in a village like that. Living in this village, there's a lot of fasting days, but in the village of Krishna, no one's fasting. And he tells Madhavendra Puri that in our village, people come and go and they beg for food sometimes. And some people, they may only drink milk. But he says, if someone does not ask anyone for food, then I come and I supply him. I give him everything to eat. And then he said he had to go, so the little boy went away. And when he went away, Madhavendra Puri's heart was just filled with love and affection for that child. And I guess we all know that that child, that young Gowala, was actually Krishna himself. And then after a while, he went off to sleep. Madhavendra Puri went off to sleep. And he had a dream. I like to call the story the story of three dreams, because there's three amazing dreams that happen in this story. So this is the first dream. He had this dream, and he saw in his dream the very same boy come to him and take him by the hand and lead him to a bush in a nearby jungle, nearby area. And this boy pointed to the bush and said, I live in this bush. And because of living in this bush, it's very hard to tolerate the intense cold and the scorching heat that's there sometimes according to the seasons. It's very difficult. And he very much requests Madhavendra Puri to take him out of there and put him in a nice temple on top of the hill. So this is Krishna asking Madhavendra Puri to save him. And he says that for so many days I was watching you and I was thinking, when is Madhavendra Puri going to come here and going to serve me in this way? Yeah, so then when the boy went away in the dream, and then immediately after that, Madhavendra Puri woke up from his dream. And he realized that that was Krishna. That earlier, out of my dream, when I received milk, it was Krishna, and I didn't recognize him. I didn't recognize him. So he went into ecstatic sadness. And he cried and cried for some time, but then he composed himself because there was service to be done. So this is another important nature of a devotee. Yes, we may go into ecstasy or swoon in different ways, but when there's service for Krishna, we must be able to compose ourselves and offer what's pleasing to Krishna. What's pleasing to Krishna. So then Madhavendra Puri got the nearby villages to help him. They went to that bush and they started, very carefully excavating the area. And then suddenly they saw the deity covered with the sand and the grass and the bushes. And they were all amazed and so very happy. And then under the direction of Madhavendra Puri, they carried this very, very heavy deity on top of Govardhan Hill. It was the instruction of the Lord to be put on top of the hill and a temple be established. And then, directed by Madhavendra Puri, a huge installation festival took place. Hundreds and hundreds of pots of water from Govindakund was brought and then taken to the top of the hill, and it was used to bathe the deity. If you have some time today, it'll be nice to read that description of that very elaborate festival. Actually, those who were there, it was just some 500-600 years ago, they felt this was similar to that very elaborate Anakut ceremony that Krishna performed just before lifting Govardhan Hill 5,000 years ago. It was so elaborate, so very elaborate. And it's also described that not only the villages around there were engaged, but villages had heard from nearby surrounding villages that Krishna has now taken position on top of the hill. And they all came and they were all fed sumptuously. And they were so moved in devotion that they all begged Madhavendra Puri to allow them a day to perform the Anakut ceremony. So for many, many days, each village was given the opportunity to cook huge amounts of food and offer it to this deity of Gopal, this deity. So that deity was worshipped for many, many years atop the hill of Govardhan. And of course, different people have different versions of the history, but that deity of Gopal now is in Nathadwar in Rajasthan and is worshipped by the followers of Vallabhacharya in the Pushti Marg. And there's some contention actually who discovered the Gopal deity, but from our accounts from the most authoritative Chaitanya Charitamrita, it was Madhavendra Puri. And the little town where he was staying in when he discovered the deity is actually named after him. It's called Jatipur. Jati comes from the word Yati, which means the sannyasi, which refers to Shripad Madhavendra Puri. So then after some time of establishing the worship of Gopal very, very nicely, he engaged and initiated Brahmanas, and Brahmanas were coming from all over the country when they heard about the beautiful worship of Gopal, and he engaged them, initiated them into the service of Gopal. Then after some time, Madhavendra Puri had another dream. This is the second dream. This is the second dream. And the same Gopal came in his dream, and he said that it's so hot here in Vrindavan. I'm feeling so hot. Can you please make an arrangement to bring chandan, sandalwood paste, or sandalwood from South India, the famous South Indian province of Malaya, where the best sandalwood comes from, and bring that sandalwood here, grind it into pulp, and smear it over my body to cool me. So I told him the sandalwood can be found in Jagannath Puri because they use the same sandalwood to cover the deity of Jagannath there. And interestingly enough, he told Madhavendra Puri, you must do it. No one else can do it. Now, at this point in his life, it's described Madhavendra Puri was in his 80s, maybe even 90. So, and to travel, those of you who know the geography of India, to travel from Govardhan all the way to Jagannath Puri by foot. I mean, just the thought of going by train is so arduous to me, but going by foot for an 80, 90-year-old person, but this is what the Lord wanted. And what happened when he got up? He wasn't thinking, oh my word, what a thing, I have to do this. No, he was ecstatic, ecstatic. He made all the arrangements for the deity worship with all the Brahmanas, and he immediately went to Jagannath Puri. And he came through Bengal, according to the history, the accounts of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He actually stopped by the home of Advaita Acharya, and they were both ecstatic in meeting each other. And before he left, Advaita Acharya begged him to please initiate him. And so Advaita Acharya also became Shripad Madhavendra's disciple. And coming down to Jagannath Puri, when he entered Orissa, he also stopped. Well, he was the first one before Lord Chaitanya, but he stopped in Remuna. And upon seeing the deity, he was so struck by the beauty, the attractiveness of the deity, And then he was just standing at the corridor, the entrance of the deity, and viewing the deity. And then while he sat there, he began talking to one of the Brahmanas and discussing with them what types of foodstuffs they offer to Gopinath in Ramuna. And he was thinking in this way, like any good cook will think when they come across some nice, interesting preparation, let's find out how we can make it, try to analyze the taste, what ingredients they use, so we can also do it. We can also cook. So this is the nature of a good cook, and Madhavendra Puri was thinking similarly. And so that Brahmin priest was explaining things, and then the Brahmin said, but actually in the evening, Gopinath is offered this amazing Amrita Keli, this very amazing sweet rice. It's like nectar. And this sweet rice is known all over the world, all over the world. And it's not offered in other places. So as he was hearing this, Madhavendra Puri had this subtle desire creeping in his mind that, would be nice to taste a little bit of the sweet rice. If I can taste it, then I can figure out how to make a similar offering. And he was thinking that, if I can get some without asking for it, then I can taste it. And as soon as he felt that, he became a little disturbed at himself. That just see, I'm desiring to taste something that's not even offered, and he began to think of Krishna, to do away with the offense that he created, enjoying the bhoga before it's offered to Krishna. I mean, I'm sure those of you who may serve Radha Damodara in Gita Nagari or here at Radhanath Temple, you know how difficult it is. You prepare this Raj Bhoga, you're cooking it, it's nice preparations. Then you have to take it up to the altar. You have to pause all your sense of smell and sense of desires. You got to pause it. It's very difficult. But here Madhavendra Puri was so in control of not even having a fleeting thought of enjoyment, that even though he thinks he had a thought of enjoyment, which isn't really because it was out of service to Gopal back at Govardhan, he felt ashamed of himself. So as soon as the arati was finished, he quickly left and he went away and he found a place to rest for the night. And he decided that even though he was traveling for so many hours and maybe days, because of the offense of desiring to enjoy bhoga, he decided to fast. So while he was sitting in one marketplace, the main priest of Gopinath temple, when he was sleeping, he had a dream. He had a dream, and Gopinath came to him in his dream and he said, my dear Brahmana, after the last offering of sweet rice, I had very slyly hid one of the pots. Normally they offer 12 pots. I had hidden one of the pots of sweet rice behind the curtain. You please come and get it. And once you come and get it, you please take it, you go into the market and look for my great devotee Madhavendra Puri and take this pot to him. And this priest woke up and he was really amazed. And he decided, okay, it's a dream, but it was so vivid that he realized there must be something to it. So he went to the deity curtain. I mean, if I have a dream, I don't think I'll trust my dream if Krishna is saying in Radhanath temple, come there, I left something there, come and take it. I probably think I'm going to disturb the deity and wake them up in the middle of the night. It'll be a greater offense. But because of the nature of this priest and how vivid it was, he believed it. So he went into the deity room, and lo and behold, behind the curtain there, he saw this pot of sweet rice. And he was so amazed that just see, the Lord has such love for this Madhavendra Puri that he stole his own sweet rice, made this whole elaborate arrangement. And then the priest closed up the temple and he went shouting out into the marketplace, looking for Madhavendra Puri. Who is Madhavendra Puri? Please come out. Our Lord has stolen and wants to deliver this pot of sweet rice. And Madhavendra Puri heard that and came out and told the priest who he was. And then the priest gave him this pot of sweet rice, and the priest offered obeisances and glorified him that you must be so special to Gopinath. And then after a short while, Madhavendra Puri began to relish the sweet rice. And Lord Chaitanya describes that he even broke the pot, the clay pot in which the sweet rice was kept, broke it into small pieces. And he kept that sweet rice, I mean, the clay pieces, the broken pieces of clay pot in a little bag, a little cloth. And he would eat some of that clay every day because that famous Amrita Keli was there. And it's described, I mean, one can imagine, you know, everybody's going to get to know about this now, this amazing reciprocation of the Lord with his great devotee Madhavendra Puri. And knowing that that was going to happen and people will come and appreciate him and glorify him, what did Madhavendra Puri did? He left first thing in the morning before anybody woke. He just left the place and went to Jagannath Puri. And when he got to Jagannath Puri, already people heard about it. They already heard about it. The news traveled, you know. In nowadays times, bad news travels fast, good news travels slow. In those days, when it was centered around Krishna, good news really traveled quickly. So when he got there, people were already waiting for him, and there was crowds around him, glorifying him in so many ways. Anyway, eventually he, you know, everyone calmed down, and then he described to them the whole story of Gopal, the installation of Gopal, and he described to them receiving the sweet rice from Tirchor Gopinath. And after hearing that, everyone was so inspired to help him get the sandalwood that Gopal wanted. So they made all sorts of arrangements, got so much, I think like it was like, I don't know, 30 or 40 kilograms, what's that in pounds, 80 odd pounds of sandalwood, and also some very special exclusive type of camphor was given to him. And all the arrangements were made to pass through all the tax collectors, because sandalwood is a very much governed, protected type of commodity. You cannot just take it out of the area. So he went back on the way to Vrindavan from Jagannath Puri, and he came again to Remuna, to the temple of Kirchor Gopinath. And when he was there, he had sweet rice again, of course. And that night, as he was sleeping, he had his third dream. The Lord came to him in his dream. Gopal, his deity from Govardhan Hill, came to him in his dream. And he told Madhavendra Puri, my dear Madhavendra, all the sandalwood that you are carrying and the camphor, I have already received it here at Govardhan. So you do not need to carry it all the way back to Govardhan. What you do now is have it ground into pulp, into sandalwood paste, and every day put it on the body of Gopinath where you are. There's no distinction between Gopinath's body and my body. It's the same. So by you putting it on Gopinath there, I will feel cool here in Govardhan. So then after he had the dream, the next morning he informed the priests that this is what Gopal wants. And they were so happy. And this is what they were doing. This is what they were doing on the instruction of Madhavendra Puri. So we find, yeah, this behavior, this attitude of Madhavendra Puri. In everything he did, he was guided by what will please Krishna. Never guided by what is comfortable for me. 80, 90-year-old person having to lug around. Of course, I think he had some assistance, if I can remember correctly. He was given some assistance in Jagannath Puri to carry the sandalwood, but it's thousands of kilometers to walk up and down from Vrindavan to Jagannath Puri and back. But he didn't consider it at all. He was simply focused on what will please his Ishtadevata, Gopal. This is the real point. This is the real point of it all. And Lord Chaitanya is glorifying him in this way, that this is the natural result of deep love for Krishna, that a devotee does not take into account any challenges, any inconveniences they may experience. They only want to serve Krishna. They only want to serve Krishna. And then Lord Chaitanya then telling his associates, Lord Nityananda and others there at Ramuna, that he spoke that famous verse that we spoke about earlier, that Prabhupada refers to, and that other purport, I'll just read it. O my Lord, O merciful Master, O Master of Mathura, when shall I see you again? Because of my not seeing you, my agitated heart has become unsteady. O most beloved one, what shall I do now? Kim karomi aham. What shall I do now? So this is the verse that's described that he was speaking over and over and over again at the end of his life. And while uttering this verse, he gave up his body and went back to Krishna. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says that just as by continually rubbing sandalwood, the smell of the sandalwood increases. And similarly, by repeating this verse, studying this verse, meditating on this verse, one's understanding of this verse will increase. However, Lord Chaitanya does also say that, well, not Lord Chaitanya, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says that only 3 people have understood the deep meaning of this verse. Because this verse actually, even though spoken by, or recited rather by Madhavendra Puri, was originally spoken by Srimati Radharani. So Srimati Radharani, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Madhavendra Puri, the only 3 that understand the depth of this verse. Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, no 4th person understands this verse, no 4th person. So it's from the heart of Madhavendra Puri that the seed of Prema Bhakti in the form of Madhurya Ras has sprouted, and it's taken form as the Bhakti Kalpataru, the tree of devotional service of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And we're very fortunate that by Mahaprabhu's mercy, empowering our Srila Prabhupada to bring that same experience of Vipralamba Bhav to the Western world, to the entire world, that we can also be engaged using our senses in the service of Krishna and aspiring towards that standard that Sripad Madhavendra Puri established of serving Krishna. So I'll stop here. Thank you all so much for your kind attention. Much appreciated. I hope the discussion was in some way beneficial and inspiring to you all. If anyone has any comments, would be very happy to hear that.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Oh, look who's that. Agari. Hare Krishna
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhu. It's very good to see you after so many years. I'm in exile.
You in exile or me in exile?
I think I'm in
exile. You can see it either way.
Now that devotees here at Kirtanagar are very loving, actually, so somehow or other I've managed to make a home here. So it's actually quite wonderful. Prabhu, with regards to, thank you for your insightful and inspirational class. So with regards to the mysticism of bhakti in facilitating one to achieve liberation. So typically the other yoga systems, it's like pratyahara, withdraw, and even with jnana yoga as well, you withdraw your senses. But with bhakti yoga, as you quoted the definition, the Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Uchate verse, that it involves extension of your senses and seeing all energies in the world as an opportunity to serve and engage in the Lord's service. So there's always this juxtaposition where there's the opportunity to serve the Lord, and there's also an opportunity to actually go into Maya. So with eating, there's an opportunity to overeat on Krishna Prasadam, while here we are, trying to engage in agricultural activities. So there's a there's a temptation to overdo it sometimes, and there's like over endeavor that can be there as one is like trying to condition their body to this kind of work. Yeah, you're an expert manager and you know all about, there may be also, if you're a temple president or manager, there's the temptation of over collecting funds for the temple. So is it that with bhakti that it's just you rely on Krishna, that okay, it's always safe as long as you're sincere, you won't go, you know, deeply into the material pool? Or can you actually perfect it on the standard of the other systems of yoga? So in other words, instead of just relying on Krishna's mercy at the time of death and saying, oh, I've tried my best, or I've been sincere, even though when you admit to yourself that, oh, you know, I may have over endeavored, some instances I may have overeaten. So in other words, how does bhakti actually achieve this mysticism of actually helping one liberate themselves, even though they are extending their senses in so many activities?
Yes, thank you for that question, Agari Krishna Prabhu. The process of bhakti, yes, one cannot misuse its efficacy or its potency. A sincere devotee will engage in bhakti and also be mindful and attentive and attuned to the rules and regulations that go with it. You know, sadhana, vaidhi, sadhana, bhakti. Yes, we are focused. Our goal is to attain prema bhakti, which is born out of raganuga bhakti. But it starts off, it develops from vaidhi sadhana bhakti. So we must be very attentive and very vigilant to the rules of devotional service at our level. And our sincerity, one can always feel sincere. I mean, I feel sincere all the time. Most often I'm not. I can feel very sincere. I can impose the sincere feeling. Of course, there's a sense, you know, we know ourselves better than others do. We know ourselves, that's true. But we may mistake deviousness for sincerity. So therefore, association of very open-hearted devotees, headed by spiritual mentors like the spiritual master, as the foremost one would expect, is essential to guide our sincerity, to keep us on the sincere, straight and narrow, so to speak. So that's essential. One's practices should not be sort of just designed by oneself. That's important. So one shouldn't think that, well, you know, yes, I've tried my best. What can I do? But a devotee, just like Madhavendra Puri is showing the platform or the standard, he was never satisfied. He was never satisfied with the extent of his service or with his so-called shortcomings. He just never said, well, Krishna, I've done everything. Yet at the same time, Krishna does allow that. Krishna does accept that in a sense. Like at the end of is it right at the end of the second last verse of the Ishopanishad? That, my dear Lord, now please remember all that I've done for you. Please do not forget me. You know, the devotee is praying, and please accept everything that I've given for you. And please, you know, do not mind my shortcomings. Actually, sorry, he doesn't say that part, but he does pray that please at least remember me and reciprocate with my offering to you. So when we have the association and guidance of the devotees, especially the spiritual master, then we are protected that even though we may have had shortcomings, we may have had slips, but the mercy of the devotees in devotional service carries us through. It really does. It really carries us through. So speaking for myself, in whatever services I do here as a manager here in Durban, I know I commit many mistakes, and due to my conditioning, I can upset devotees. I've become expert in the art of upsetting devotees by making all sorts of unpopular decisions. But, I have faith that I have reasonable connection with saintly Vaishnavas who wouldn't hesitate to call me out on my activities if they are wrong. I've worked hard to establish those types of relationships. And when they do call me out, I try to adjust myself. But if one doesn't work hard on developing that type of association, then it can be very dangerous. One can get into that callous type of mood. Well, I tried my best. Krishna should reciprocate now. He should accept it. But part of devotional service, an important part that's sometimes not emphasized or followed enough, is to develop those types of relationships where you'll be protected. Where you won't be allowed just to be lackadaisical or casual and just expect Krishna to fill in the blanks. Of course, Krishna loves his devotees so much that he does that. It's that famous cliche sometimes we like to feel inspired by. For every step we take, Krishna takes 10 steps towards us. Yeah. So I think the key is the development of those strong relationships of senior Vaishnavas. Would anyone else like to add some other perspectives to that question? All right, Sarvatma Prabhu, I think we could conclude now, if that's all right.
I must say that whenever I met you, and it's been several decades, never heard you speak. I mean, exchange pleasantries and so on, but you were always with your spiritual master, Giriraj Swami. So he did the talking, he did the Krishna Katha. So it's very encouraging to hear what you have to say. We appreciate. I don't think I have the same eagerness to be chastised and corrected as you do. Certainly take it under consideration. And I would like to, if it's okay with you and nobody else has any to add, I would like to quote a verse from Madhavendra Puri himself, which is quoted in the second canto of the Bhagavatam. Mugdam mam nigantantu. I don't know if you know this verse. I actually made a print and had it framed for many years, right next to, right on my desk, because I found it fascinating. Let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusion. I do not mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me a fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as mad, and the learned philosophers may assert that I am much too proud. Still, my mind does not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I be unable to do it. There's quite an inspiration. So any other comments, inspirations, reflections, questions, or chastisements as requested by the speaker? Okay. Okay, go ahead. Kamala Sundari. Unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Sarvatma Prabhu, Sarv Damodara Prabhu. I just have a question. You mentioned that Srila Madhavendra Puri, he established this mode of separation, this Vipralamba Bhava, and it was ecstatic. Now, for us, well, or for me, these feelings sometimes come about and it's very minute. with devotees or the spiritual master, and it's not ecstatic. It makes you feel sad. So can you explain on that, please? You muted, Swarupa.
We were separated by sound. So it's encouraging to hear that you do feel separation from the devotees. And, you know, the feeling of sadness on the material level is very uninspiring and demotivating. When on the material level we are separated from loved ones based on the body and the mind, or based on the connection of the body and the mind, then those feelings result in sadness, which is disappointing and demotivating. But the sadness that comes from separation from Krishna and his devotees on the spiritual platform, that sadness is not demotivating. It's inspiring and pushing one further to serve Krishna more and more. That's the difference. Sadness in separation materially is demotivating, but sadness in separation from Krishna in spiritual life is inspiring, and it's motivating to do more, to do better, and to increase the hankering to be with Krishna. So that I would say is the difference. So it is sad, but it's ecstatic sadness because it's bringing you closer and closer to Krishna. Is that all right?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Sarvatma Prabhu. It was a very purifying experience to be in all of y'all's association. Much appreciated. And my best wishes and obeisances to Divya. Please offer that to her from me. Oh, and Revati Mataji, so nice to see you. Hare Krishna. Jai.
So,
Agari, let's keep in touch.
Yes, Prabhu, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Prabhu, thank you for your class.
Hare Krishna.
So before I ask everybody to unmute themselves and express their gratitude towards our speaker, I'd like to run a small advertisement for Thursday, which is Gora Purnima, and we have two speakers. One at 7 in the morning is going to be Sri Prahlad Prabhu speaking on Gora Leela, and at 7 p.m. Madhavendrapuri Prabhu speaking on Gora Leela as well. And as now is the time, it's time for both of us to eat, as you have missed your lunch, but we've been fasting because of Ekadasi, so it's our Dwarasi, so we should also attend to breakfast and honor Krishna Prasadam. So please unmute yourselves and express your gratitude towards our speaker.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Jai, thank you very much for a wonderful class.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
And
Bye,
please offer
Prabhupada.
to your dear wife as well.
Okay. Hare Krishna. All glories to Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sarvatma Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.